I bought all these tablets from AliExpress just to answer the question, why do they look like this? This one is clearly a tent. These two look more like door stoppers, or maybe ramps for tech decks. And these ones, well, sort of look like tablets, assuming you want them to pull double duty as a freaking Frisbee. Now, obviously, companies aren't just pumping out tablets in random silly shapes anymore, mostly. So what's the deal with these? Are they packed full of the same malware we found in our Android TV boxes? Do they have any redeeming features that'll make you want to abandon your iPad for, ooh, walkie-talkie functionality built in? Oh, the ability to download a dedicated computer, which, wait, what? Legacy serial ports. I don't know about that one personally. This black doorstop here is easily the thickest Android tablet that I have ever seen. And that's just the beginning of its surprises. Aside from the mic, speakers, and 10.1-inch touchscreen, its features are actually very reminiscent of those awful Android TV boxes, including the complete lack of a battery, which is unexpected for something called a tablets. There's an option for PoE at least, which allows it to be powered with a network cable rather than with a separate plug, but we didn't spring for that. The I/O is even similar to the TV boxes. Power, 2 USB-A ports, a headphone jack that contains a button deep down inside it for reflashing the firmware. Okay. USB-C, a micro SD, gigabit Ethernet, and the white port is actually listed as serial. And indeed, it doesn't seem to work with USB peripherals like mice or flash drives, though it does output power. Did they really go to the length of including serial only to replace the connector with USB so that you need an adapter for the native serial connection? No, the answer is far less silly. This port supports USB to UART adapters, which allows you to plug in conventional serial devices, be they barcode scanners or anything else you can imagine. Under the hood, it's running Android 10, because you aren't really getting the AliExpress Android experience unless you're using a version of Android that's never getting another security update. Other than that, the under-the-hood specs make the overall experience pretty responsive, and there's no signs of the dreaded core Java virus. For now, anyway. It comes pre-rooted, which doesn't worry us at all. Inside the device, wait, is that a battery to keep the clock accurate? And a button to reset it there? I guess it does have a battery after all. I mean, realistically, for something that's sitting at a desk where people fill out their license plate number for parking validation, it's gonna get the job done just fine. You don't really need a proper battery or a way to mount it, just like you don't need volume controls or the default bottom navigation to show up and give you a way back out of the window you're in. I mean, if you go into settings, you probably want to remain in settings until the device is powered down, right? Right? I mean, at least it was cheap and, wait, how much? 370 Canadian rupees. That's like 275 real monies. For that price, I could have had a Galaxy Tab S6 Lite with a bigger and better screen, a battery, and support for up to Android 13. Okay, forget Android for a second. What if we got a Windows tablet? For around 300 US, we got this triangular prism of a PC with a Celeron J4125, 8 gigs of DDR3, and Windows 10 Pro. It's not exactly a powerhouse compared to other Windows devices, but it's certainly serviceable for text entry. It boots from an integrated 64 gig memory chip, and ours came with a bonus 128 gig SATA M.2. The screen is 10.1 inches, just like the Android, but this time the resolution is 1920 by 1200. Not bad. It's a bit thicker, but it's got buttons on the side for power and volume controls, HDMI out, and otherwise a very similar, complete I/O layout. At least on the outside. It's not until we crack it open that we find its wasted potential. There's an extra B-key M.2 slot for the optional 4G card, an unused USB-C port, that sure would have been nice to have, missing headers for a fan, and shockingly, an Intel i225V 2.5 gig Ethernet controller. Don't get too excited though. This i225 is one of the earliest models of that chip, and there are known issues that occur at speeds exceeding gigabit. But you know what the biggest wasted potential here is? The lack of a way to properly mount the bloody thing again. If these tablets are being used to control digital signage, like behind the counter restaurant menus, it makes sense that you'd want to mount them on a table or a wall. I mean, at least the Android one had the thoughtfulness to include a Kensington lock, which we also found on the Android tent. This one is kind of cool. It's got dual mirrored displays running at 1280 by 800. It's only got 2 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of storage, and it runs Android 8.1. meaning that even for $250, I'm pretty disappointed with the internals. Again, no battery, which it totally has space for on the motherboard. But if it's intended for text input and to be permanently installed, I guess it's better to have no battery than a fire hazard swollen battery. But what is up with these devices missing volume buttons? Or USB-C for power? Like, what is this one actually for? You guys got any ideas? Real estate presentations. Here, have a look at what I'm doing on my side. Kitchen building. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. In both of those cases, you could probably just sit side by side and look at one proper size screen though. Come on, let's brainstorm here.
You can put your fist in it and then use it as a glove.
Ah, it's a power gauntlet. Hold on, we're gonna have to do my left arm. It's a lot smaller. Definitely badminton. Frankly, we're probably overthinking this. All three of these so far seem to be POS equipment. Not to say that they're bad, that's to say point of sale equipment. Though I'm not saying they're good either. After we ordered these tablets, we noticed the local Denny's locations all seemed to be adopting similar tablets at their tables, except those ones include charging ports, wireless charging for your devices, and they have batteries in them. Seems a lot better. So I'd only bother checking out the link to these ones if you want a sign tablet that's worse than what the local pancake dispensary has. So far then, we haven't seen anything that's terribly useful, or at least not a great value, just kind of wacky. But this all black weatherproof Windows tablet is definitely both useful and battery powered. We know that because it came to us with nearly 13,000 battery cycles counted since November 2020. That means, doing the math, it went through roughly a battery cycle every 2 hours from then until the day we ordered it. And that wasn't the only sign of use. Someone had been using it to watch the latest historical drama on iQIYI, China's equivalent of Netflix. And even if it was new, this thing is not terribly powerful. Just 4 gigs of DDR3 RAM, a 64 gig generic SSD, and an Intel Atom Z8350. That's a processor that requires only slightly more power than the 0-watt one on LTTstore.com. I/O includes NFC, mini HDMI, a SIM card slot that supports LTE, and we've got buttons for control. Finally! We've also got some pogo pins that attach to this car mount. And that gives it 2 more USB 2 ports, gigabit Ethernet, and a barrel jack for charging. Ooh, and a serial port. When we open it up though, we find that the 8,500 milliamp hour battery is in fact only 7,800 milliamp hours, and there's markings everywhere for EM-I82H and EM-I86H. These are 2 potential real model numbers for this device, which is apparently made by Emboor as a barcode scanner. That makes sense given the inclusion of serial. For nearly $700, it really feels like we could have bought something that isn't secondhand, but with an IP67 rating, it should be able to withstand being dunked in water for several minutes. Now we haven't tested that yet because we didn't want to break it before we started filming, but now we can. I mean, how long do we want to leave it in there for? Can I use it? This is a capacitive touchscreen, so it doesn't function at all underwater. Not even a little. I don't know what else to say, it survived. I mean, obviously this isn't the most scientific test, but what? If it passed, were you gonna buy a used tablet for this price? No. Good job, buddy. This padded bumblebee of a tablet also claims to be IP67 rated, which we are eager to put to the test, but its special trick is that it supposedly has the ability to communicate with walkie-talkies. Cool if true. Emphasis on if true. It appears to be identical to the Runbow P2, which would be great, except that the version of Android 8.1 that it's running seems to be borrowed from Ulefone, adding one more layer of rebranding and remixing. The outside contains most of its uniqueness on the front, with 2 unlabeled buttons, presumably for push-to-talk, for the walkie-talkie functionality, but we never got that working. Arrow buttons for navigation, physical representations of the standard Android back, home, and circle buttons, and an OK button. These are all really useful in an environment where you're wearing gloves. Or at least they would be if they all worked. Back and home function, but the arrow keys are all wrong. The circle brings up media controls, and the top 2 buttons for push to talk don't seem to do anything at all. As with any tablet, the edges contain ports and buttons, so it's got USB-C. Can you shut up? USB-C for charging. It's recessed though, so most cables won't fit. Another USB-C for data, that has the same issue. A detachable antenna, a headphone jack, IR maybe, a power button, a dial to select your walkie-talkie channels, and on the back is a cover that gives you access to 2 micro SD slots and 2 SIM card slots. That's pretty cool. The software is really what's important here though. It's all bog standard Android 8.1, except for the push to talk app. This is where you should be able to set up your walkie-talkie connections or possibly receive shortwave radio. It's hard for us to know for sure though, because even though we have walkie-talkies, even though we found the program to access their channels, and even though we matched up everything perfectly between the two, we don't even know what this app is called, and there doesn't seem to be much information available about walkie-talkie apps that properly use VHF and UHF radio signals. Can it at least swim though? Water always wins these. Just takes time. Didn't immediately die. Does it float? No. What I want to do though is find out if this touchscreen works, because it seemed like it might have been a pressure sensitive one and it's not. But could I navigate using the buttons? Oh, okay, hold on a second. Okay, just clicks in the middle of the screen? It doesn't do anything useful, so I think the script said it doesn't do anything, which is fine, but it does sort of do something. As crap as it is, at least it survived the water test, so what can we take away from this exercise then? If you buy tablets for a specific purpose on AliExpress, you might end up with something usable, or you might just get left high and dry, separated from your money. You know what won't leave you high and dry?